Condemnation and restrictions for 2UE following broadcasting inquiry. Power workers vote to return, but restrictions remain. And Australian through after Titanic Davis Cup struggle.
From National 9 News, this is Nightline with Jim Whaley.
Good evening. Top commercial radio station 2UE was handed a new set of code books today. The Broadcasting Authority releasing its report into the so-called cash for comment affair, spelling out the way any sponsorship deals must be treated in future. Under stringent new conditions, announcers such as John Laws and Alan Jones must disclose sponsorship links every time they mention a sponsor's name on air. This follows the authorities' finding that 2UE had repeatedly breached radio guidelines.
Seemingly a world away from the controversy he helped start, John Laws shrugging off accusations of cash for comment with a firm no comment. 500 pages long, the ABA's inquiry into the once secret world of multi-million-dollar sponsorship deals at 2UE. The story of how advertising was dressed up as editorial comment by its star broadcasters John Laws and Alan Jones, and how 2UE did little to stop it.
The panel has concluded that 2UE's management systems were not adequate to prevent breaches of the codes or of the conditions of its licence.
Breaches which involved a failure to properly identify political material, a failure to disclose relevant facts, and ads presented as news. In total, 5 breaches of the Broadcasting Services Act and 90 breaches of the Commercial Radio Codes Practice, all because Laws and Jones withheld the fact they were being paid to promote the likes of banks, airlines and phone companies. Much worse than any fines, the ABA has slapped new conditions on 2UE's licence. For many companies, the old appeal of John Laws and Alan Jones used to be that they were able to disguise what were paid announcements as editorial comment. Now, those days are over. Every time the two men mention a sponsor's name, they will have to disclose any sponsorship deal.
This has the potential of turning into a farce, doesn't it? I mean, hi, I've just come back from overseas on Qantas. Oh, by the way, they're paying me.
2UE must also keep a public register of sponsorship details, including their value, and any advertisements must be clearly distinguishable from other program matter. The station says it has already in place a strict set of policies to ensure promotional material isn't disguised as news or comment. It also had a swipe for the ABA.
We are disappointed by and disagree with many of the findings.
Mark Burrows reporting for Nightline.
Victorian power workers have returned to work after Premier Steve Bracks invoked emergency powers in an attempt to restore normal electricity supplies across the state. But as Wayne Dyer reports, restrictions are likely to remain for another 2 days, with forecast high temperatures likely to strain the system.
Power workers walked back onto the job shortly before 7 p.m. after reluctantly agreeing to abide by the state's emergency electricity laws invoked by Premier Steve Bracks this morning.
I mean, they keep doing this to the workers and kicking them in the teeth all the time.
I feel for their families. I know it goes against some of their beliefs and traditions to have this order placed on them. Nevertheless, I appreciate their goodwill on behalf of the Victorian public.
The return followed all-night talks which failed to end the stalemate between the privately owned Yallourn Energy and its staff. Restrictions will remain in force until at least Wednesday, with enforcement officers patrolling for cheats.
I notice you've got all your lighting off. That's excellent.
Prosecutions could be launched, which will be heard in a court, and the penalties there are $10,000 for an individual and $1 million for a corporation.
But many are confused over what they can and can't operate.
Do you realise that those televisions over there should be off?
Which television, I'm sorry? The back TVs?
Should be off,
yes. No, we've got the front ones off.
Others spent hours attempting to be excused from the bans.
Commercial dishwashers, no, they're actually not on the exemption list, so you can still use ours.
People are just trying to pin down who has got the responsibility for granting any exemptions when necessary. So a degree of frustration.
Businesses are already counting their losses, estimated at $25 million a day.
What might happen here is melting chocolates, definitely melting chocolates.
But while the vast majority of Victorians have been doing the right thing, power companies have received hundreds of calls from angry homeowners complaining about neighbours who haven't. Wayne Dyer for Nightline.
Mining unions have tonight launched a snap 24-hour strike at BHP coal operations across Australia, protesting against the company's acceptance of a 5% cut in the price of coking coal sold to Japan. Unions say the cut, which follows an 18% decrease last year, will mean thousands more job losses. They claim Asia's economic recovery should have meant a price increase. Adelaide commuters were hit by a snap bus strike today, with drivers refusing to return after a stop-work meeting this morning. Thousands of people were left waiting for buses that didn't come. Although some buses continued to operate during the strike, pickets have now been set up to prevent buses leaving their depots tonight. The union says members are trying to protect their current wages and superannuation when the bus service is privatised in April. Drivers are due to return to work tomorrow morning, but are threatening a campaign of further random strikes. There's been another fatal shooting by police, this time involving New South Wales officers in the Sydney beachside suburb of Bondi. A 25-year-old man was killed after they responded to a domestic dispute. The state coroner will be among those investigating.
Police were sent to the Bondi house after neighbours reported hearing screaming. At the front door, one officer struggled with an unarmed man. The policeman stumbled into a garden rock pool, where it's understood his head was forced underwater. As the other two officers tried to subdue the man, 2 shots rang out, and the 25-year-old died almost instantly.
The police officer had gained serious injuries and was actually in fear of his life.
A team of police drawn from outside the area will examine the circumstances surrounding the shooting. South Australian police have charged a man with murdering his de facto wife. It's alleged 54-year-old Kenneth Alexander Fallon shot dead 59-year-old Maureen Elvey in the house they shared at Hackham in Adelaide's southern suburbs. Police say he then drove from the house, stopping in the Seacombe shopping centre, where he held officers at bay for 6 hours before surrendering. Fallon appeared briefly in court today but did not apply for bail. And 5 years after New South Wales MP John Newman was shot dead outside his Sydney home, the man accused of plotting his murder has gone on trial. The Supreme Court heard the 47-year-old MP was the victim of a political assassination, masterminded by his rival, Fairfield councillor Fung No. No and Quang Dao are facing trial for murder. The prosecutor telling the court this was the killing carried out for greed for political power, also for hatred of John Newman. It was revealed there had been 3 serious attempts on Mr Newman's life before he was finally gunned down outside his Cabramatta home 5.5 years ago, just months out from a state election. The prosecutor said it doesn't matter that neither No or Dow pulled the trigger, and claimed No had psychological domination over a number of others whom he used to carry out the actual shooting. The trial is expected to run 3 months. Raymond Dale for Nightline.
There were calls today for New South Wales Premier Bob Carr to sack the chairman of a prisoner review council over his comments that most inmates should be freed. Retired Judge Kep Enderby said yesterday that it was counterproductive having 80% of Australians